Hyannis was a small, peaceful town where life moved at a gentle pace. The streets were quiet, the people familiar, and every corner held a comforting routine. Yet, on the edge of this tranquil town stood a modest house where silence was overwhelming. Inside lived 5-year-old Emma, a child who hadn't spoken a single word since the day tragedy struck her family. Emma's parents, James and Caroline, were renowned dog trainers known throughout the region for their gentle approach and skilled work with service dogs. Their family was inseparable, filled with laughter, love, and the joyful chaos of 6 lively German shepherds. But all that changed in an instant when a devastating accident took Emma's parents away from her. Since that moment, the bright, curious little girl had retreated into silence. Her sparkling eyes dulled, and her small hands clung tightly to memories she could no longer voice. The 6 German shepherds her parents had trained stayed faithfully by her side. They weren't just dogs. They were Emma's lifeline, her only connection to a world that suddenly felt cold and empty. This is a story about loss and healing, about the unbreakable bond between a little girl and her loyal companions. It's a story about how love, patience, and loyalty can bring light to even the darkest places. Stay with me to witness Emma's journey back to herself. Before the accident, Emma's life was filled with laughter, curiosity, and endless energy. Her parents were not only experts in their craft, but also deeply loving and devoted. James and Caroline spent their days training dogs to assist those in need, service dogs for the disabled, therapy dogs for hospitals, and faithful companions for lonely hearts. Their passion for their work infused the home with purpose and warmth. Emma grew up surrounded by barking dogs, the sound of commands, and the steady rhythm of training sessions. The 6 German shepherds, Max, Luna, Rex, Bella, Duke, and Shadow, were more than pets. They were part of the family. Emma knew each dog's personality. Max was a wise leader, Luna playful and gentle, Rex strong and protective. She was a happy child, running through the yard, playing with the dogs, and learning about love and responsibility from her parents. Every corner of the house echoed with joy and warmth. Emma's future seemed bright and full of promise. Then came the day that shattered Emma's world. James and Caroline were on their way to a training seminar when their car was hit by a truck. The crash was sudden and devastating. There were no survivors. News of the tragedy swept through Hyannis, leaving the town heartbroken. But none felt the pain more than Emma and her grandparents, Margaret and Walter, who had taken her in after the accident. Emma's world became silent. Overnight, she stopped speaking. No cries, no whispers, no words at all. Her bright eyes grew hollow, and she withdrew deep inside herself. The house that once rang with laughter became a quiet tomb, filled only with the soft footsteps of 6 dogs and the whispers of grief. Margaret and Walter were in their 70s. Their hair had grayed, and their steps slowed with age. But their hearts were full of love for Emma. They did everything they could to comfort her, gentle hugs, warm meals, soft voices. Yet Emma remained distant, locked behind an invisible wall of silence and sorrow. Taking care of a young child was challenging enough, but caring for 6 large dogs added a heavy burden. The German shepherds were loyal and well-trained, but their upkeep was costly. Food, veterinary care, and household expenses piled up quickly. Bills stacked on the kitchen table, and worries grew heavier with each passing day. Margaret and Walter talked quietly at night, wondering how they could keep everything together. The thought of losing the dogs was unbearable, but so was the fear of financial ruin. Throughout all this, the 6 German shepherds were Emma's constant companions. They sensed her pain without words. Max would press his head against her small shoulder, offering silent reassurance. Luna nudged her gently, coaxing a faint smile. Rex stood guard nearby, alert and protective. The dogs never demanded attention or fuss. Instead, they offered steady companionship, their presence a soothing balm to Emma's fragile heart. When Emma sat silently by the window, the dogs sat beside her, their eyes filled with understanding. They followed her through the house, resting their heads on her lap. They were patient and loyal, the only family Emma still had. One cold morning, Margaret and Walter gathered the courage to speak to Emma. "We might have to find new homes for the dogs," Walter said softly, his voice breaking. Emma's small hand froze mid-stroke on Max's fur. Without a word, she stood up, walked quietly past her grandparents, and closed the door behind her. She curled under her blankets, turning her back on the world once more. Outside the door, the dogs sensed a change. They paced, restless but calm, their usual loyalty tinged with unease. Max stayed longer than the others, as if trying to understand what was happening. Days passed, and Emma barely left her room. Meals went untouched, and the house felt emptier than ever. But the dogs refused to give up. Each morning, they gathered outside Emma's door, sitting patiently and waiting. One by one, they began bringing their leashes, nudging them gently against the door. Their eyes pleaded for her to come out. Slowly, something stirred inside Emma. One morning, Emma cracked her door open. Max stood there, leash in his mouth, tail wagging slowly. Without hesitation, Emma reached out and took the leash, her fingers brushing against Max's head. One by one, she clipped the leashes onto the dogs' collars, her hand steady despite the tightness in her chest. Margaret and Walter watched quietly from the doorway, their hearts aching but hopeful. Outside, the park was still and quiet. Dew clung to the grass, sparkling in the early sunlight. Emma moved with the dogs by her side, their powerful bodies matching her steady pace. Passers-by paused, whispering in amazement at the sight of a tiny girl leading 6 large dogs with practiced ease. Emma barely noticed. For the first time in months, she breathed in the crisp air and felt the steady rhythm of the dogs beside her. Suddenly, Max froze. His ears perked up, and his eyes locked on something near the lake. Emma followed their gaze and saw a small child struggling in the water, a toddler no older than 4. Without hesitation, Max bolted forward, leash slipping from Emma's hand. Luna and Rex followed immediately. The other 3 dogs barked sharply from the shore, drawing attention and signaling for help. Underwater, Max gripped the child gently by the shirt, while Luna helped keep the child balanced. Rex nudged them toward the shore. The rescue was seamless, as if choreographed by years of training. Onlookers gasped and rushed over as the dogs pulled the child safely from the water. One woman called emergency services, while another comforted the trembling toddler. People whispered in awe of the dog's intelligence and bravery. News crews arrived, and videos of the rescue spread quickly across social media. Emma's story touched hearts nationwide. With public attention came support. Donations flooded in, covering food, veterinary bills, and other expenses. Neighbors brought treats and toys. Local businesses offered help quietly and generously. Organizations stepped forward to ensure Emma would never be separated from her dogs. Emma's grandparents were overwhelmed by the kindness. Though Emma still hadn't spoken, she felt something shift inside, a weight lifting, a light returning. One peaceful afternoon, Emma sat cross-legged on the living room floor. The dogs gathered around her, lying quietly at her feet. For a long moment, silence wrapped the room. Then, softly and uncertainly, Emma whispered, "Max." The room held its breath. Max perked up, ears twitching, eyes fixed on her. Luna gave a small, encouraging bark. Emma called each dog's name, Max, Luna, Rex, her voice trembling but growing stronger. Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. Walter turned away, pretending to wipe something from his face. For the first time since the accident, Emma spoke. Not out of fear or sorrow, but love. Surrounded by her loyal companions in a community that refused to let her fall, Emma smiled a real, unguarded smile. The house that once felt empty finally felt like home again. Emma's journey reminds us of the power of love, loyalty, and patience. It shows how healing can come in quiet, small steps, through the unwavering support of friends, family, and faithful companions. If this story touched your heart, please share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Because sometimes, even the smallest voice can make the biggest difference.